Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's conversation between authors Otho Eskin and Amy Pease. Thank you so much to the Mysterious Bookshop for having us. We're super excited to be here. And thank you to Ryan for helping us set this all up. My name is Meg Gilbert, and I am Otho Eskin's project manager, and I'm delighted to be guiding this conversation this evening. A quick note on how we all ended up here, why Otho and Amy ended up here together. Otho's team was looking at other authors who were writing about the opioid crisis, and we came across Amy and were struck by the similar themes and the quality of the storytelling. And we knew Otho and Amy would have a compelling conversation. So here we are. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis and bio of both of the authors and their novels, FIRETRAP and NORTHWOODS. Otho Eskin is a lawyer and a former member of the United States Foreign Service. He is active in the Washington theater scene and a playwright whose work has appeared in New York, Washington, D.C., and Europe. FIRETRAP is his third novel in the Mark Zorn thriller series. A little bit about FIRETRAP. Washington, D.C. homicide detective Mark Zorn takes on a far-reaching, complicated investigation when a narcotic, more deadly than fentanyl, spreads across the city, causing countless fatalities. A little bit about Amy. She is an alumnus of the University of Wisconsin and Madison Writers Studio and works as a nurse practitioner, where she is nationally recognized HIV specialist. Northwoods is her first novel. A little bit about Northwoods. The dark underbelly of an idyllic Midwestern resort town is revealed in the aftermath of a murder, which ties to America's opioid epidemic in this unput-downable and thrilling debut that is perfect for fans of James Lee Burke, William Kent Kruger, and Mindy Mejia. So now that you've all heard me monologue, let's say hi to Amy and Otho. How are y'all doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, Meg. Thank you very much for the introduction.
Fantastic. It's my pleasure. So we'll go ahead and get right started with this Q&A. The first question being that neither of you have backgrounds in writing. Otho, you were a lawyer, then in the Army and Foreign Service. Amy, you're a nurse. So what inspired you to take up the pen? And why don't we begin with Amy, please?
Sure. Well, I think I wanted to become a writer ever since I was about 9 years old, and my great-grandpa gave me his first edition copy, 1908 copy of Anne of Green Gables. And for those who've read the book, Anne eventually becomes an author. And at about that same time, I remember winning my second grade essay competition. And I don't remember what the essay was about, but I won a bicycle light. And my teacher told me that I was a good writer. So, you know, when you're that age, you just assume that whatever a grown-up tells you is true. And so I think I internalized that for like about 30 years before I finally decided to do something about it.
That's wonderful. You let it simmer for a bit and then it all came out. Wonderful. And Otho, what about you? How did you start writing thriller novels?
Well, first place, I should say that I've always written. Ever since in high school, I started to write short stories. Nothing ever came of them. They all disappeared, thankfully. But I was in for 20-some years in the Foreign Service, and I was a political officer, which meant that basically I was writing political reports on whatever country I was serving in, which could have been Yugoslavia or East Germany or wherever. So I wrote all the time, and I never got out of the habit. When I retired from the Foreign Service, I wanted to continue to write. I love writing. I love the actual experience of it. And so I started writing plays. I've been interested in theater as an observer for decades. And so I've written many plays, some of which have been produced in Washington and in New York. Got a play coming up in London in April. So I've never given up on playwriting. But I wanted to, after I'd done about half a dozen plays, I wanted to stretch myself with a new genre, and I decided to go for novel writing and genre writing, specifically thriller writing, which is what I do. And so that's how I got into it. That's the sordid story of my life, my writing life, anyway.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Otho. So very fun that both of you have had writing as a part of your life, basically since childhood. That's really exciting. So another similarity between the two of you, as I mentioned earlier, that we found is the common theme of the opioid epidemic, right? That is in both of your books in very central ways. So Otho, I wonder if you could start us off by telling us what compelled you to write about the opioid crisis.
Well, like so many other people, a few years ago, I began reading about Oxycoton and the big pharmas behind some of the drug being sold in the United States. And I was outraged, as so many people were. And I began to read a lot about it. I read a number of books about drugs in general and about Oxycontin and its distribution and the ghastly harm it has done in terms of addiction and death throughout the country. And I thought, this is made for a novel. And so after about 6 months of reading about it, I undertook to write a novel in which the big pharma, and specifically one terrible company which manufactures a new drug which has fentanyl added to it, and which is going to, has a legal version of it, is already causing havoc in the Washington, D.C. area, and increasingly in other cities around the country. And so that was the starting point. It was basically one of outrage about how certain big pharma corporations actually encourage addiction. They deny that, of course, but that's what they were doing. That's what's got me started.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's ever present in our news.
That's right.
And Amy, same question to you. And then also a dovetail question for you, Amy. Did you read other novels about the crisis? And if so, were you trying to do something different?
Well, I started writing Northwoods before Purdue Pharma, before the Oxycontin story was sort of broken. And I remember telling my husband the plot, and he was like, that sounds a little far-fetched. And I was like, no, I'm telling you, as some like a healthcare provider, this is not, I guarantee this is happening. And then fast forward a couple years, and the whole Purdue Pharma thing, Oxycontin thing was revealed. So I feel quite validated by that. But also, when I was in grad school and early on in my nurse practitioner career, it was at the height of the push for Oxycontin, and all of the things you hear about the drug reps coming to sort of put pressure on prescribers and things like that, that all happened to me. And, you know, the way that the drug manufacturers would send these like experts to present at conferences, that sort of stuff all happened to me and everyone I knew and worked with. And so there comes, and I didn't prescribe a lot of Oxycontin, but some, and it comes with like a sense of guilt, but also a lot of cynicism. But like Otho said, it also seems ready-made for fiction, especially crime fiction, because it has the conspiracy element. And I thought, you know, yes, there are other novels that talk about this and other books that talk about this, but I was hopeful that I could add a perspective from a healthcare provider, like someone who was directly involved in this sort of thing. And like, for example, Dope Sick, not a novel, but, you know, a nonfiction book and then made into a really amazing series. I watched a few episodes of that series and I had to stop because it was so triggering. Like even the titles of the episodes were things like The Fifth Vital Sign, Breakthrough Pain. Those are all concepts and rules that we were taught by respected professionals, and come to find out later that these were manufactured by the drug company to sell a dangerous product.
I must just add that I was once prescribed Oxycontin. I had many, many years ago open heart surgery. So not the surgeon, but my practitioner prescribed or wrote out a prescription for Oxycontin. I never took it. I'm kind of anti-drug personally, so I don't like to take stuff that I don't know. And I already was suspicious, so I had no idea what the effect of Oxycontin might have been on me. For all I know, I could have been a drug addict by now. But in any case, but it was very easy. Nobody asked any questions. You just go to your pharmacist, give him that little slip of paper, and he gives you a life-changing bottle of pills. Mm-hmm. So I'm not speaking from personal experience. I'm a kind of, the most dangerous drug I take is aspirin. So that's what, but I just saw how easy it would be for somebody who was in pain, genuine pain. I was in real pain for a while after that surgery, and who couldn't stand it anymore and could start taking this stuff. It was so easy, a slippery slope, as they say.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks for contributing that, Otho, and definitely see the scary easiness of it on both sides, right? Easy to prescribe, easy to take, and I love that. That's a perfect sequitur into the fact that. So you both bring certain things from your background into your novels, right? We've got you bringing in the healthcare side, Amy, into yours. And Otho, even though it's not directly related, you bring a lot of your foreign service background into the Mark Zorn novels. So in continued similarities, both of your main characters have skeletons in their closet, right? They have a past that gives them texture in whatever experiences that they are going through. So my question to you is, how do you go about creating a main character, right? This is, maybe we'll start with you, Otho. This is Marco's third book. This is the third in the Mark Zorn thriller. So when you were first creating Marco, what was your process like?
Well, you're giving me credit by describing it as a process. I had no idea what I was really doing. But I knew that when I started to write the book, that the main challenge for me would be the main character, because that's what most readers are interested in. They either care about or are interested in the main character, and if they don't, they won't finish the book. Not this kind of book, in any case. So I needed somebody who was had a plausible connection with crime. So a homicide detective is what I settled on. But I didn't want to make him a conventional homicide detective. Many of them, as Mark Zorn does, have a problem in his past. But I didn't want that to be up front. He is, in fact, a very efficient detective. He closes lots of cases, and he is very effective in his investigations. But I also wanted to make him unusual. So the most unusual thing is that he doesn't carry a gun. And that, but when Reflecting Pool came out, and when I was doing the radio and other interviews, was one of the things that people tripped over because they found it hard to believe. Well, it is hard to believe, let's face it. And some people thought I was trying to make a political point. But in fact, Mark Zorn doesn't carry a gun, not for political or theoretical reasons. It has to do with his understanding of his own character. And it's hinted at in the Reflecting Pool and a bit in Headshot, but it isn't really elaborated. You just know that he's got something that he wants to hide and does not want to experience again that had happened to him when he was actually a teenager living in Maine. So there's something there, but I don't reveal it at all. Unlike your character, Amy, where you do learn about what is
he
going
reveals
on.
It all.
Yeah, well, as you should.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great, Amy, if you want to answer the same question, it all gets revealed. And obviously, we don't expect either of you to reveal what the skeletons are in this Zoom, because people should go read the book. But over to you.
Yes, by all means. Yes.
Well, you could read the first 5 paragraphs of the book and know what Eli Skeletons are pretty much. He's suffering from not addiction to opioids, but alcohol as a result of some mental health issues he's going through. He's a military veteran and really is at a low point. So he was born fully formed from my mind. And I don't know why. I think he must have been living up there for a long time, because when I came up with the idea for this story, it was because I just out of the blue decided to challenge myself to come up with an image, like whatever appeared in my mind. And it was an image of a melancholy man floating in a lake at night, and music comes across the water. And it was just Eli. And I don't know. He definitely, I think the story is driven by him and what he's going through. And he tries so hard to be a good guy and do the right thing. And sometimes, you can do your best and still need help.
I remember that scene very well. And it's a very, very effective scene, that opening scene where you see him, you don't know who he is, but floating in the lake, and music in the distance. And you soon find out why he's hearing music. It's a very good scene. I commend you very highly.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Wonderful that Eli and Marco both sort of came birthed fully formed from both of you.
Well, Marco, actually, I learned more about him as I go along. But he wasn't fully formed. We knew that he had a problem which he's been trying to live with all his life, but it's not one that is going to be obvious to the reader until it's revealed, which it isn't revealed in any of these 3 books. So
we get little tidbits of it here and there.
Here and there, yes.
Yeah.
Amy, I just wanted to say how much I really like Northwood. I was born and grew up on the East Coast, the notorious East Coast. And although I know Chicago pretty well, I don't know the parts in between, or parts in between Washington, D.C. and downtown Los Angeles. And I really enjoyed our adventures into the Northwoods. It's a part of the country I don't know at all. And I really felt that it was very exotic. I enjoyed you as a tour guide to that part of the world I didn't know. And it was lots of fun. So I appreciate the introduction to a part of this country I don't know.
Well, you've got an open invitation for a in-person tour anytime you want to make the trip. I don't recommend coming in January.
No, I don't. I think January is off the calendar. Maybe mid-July.
Exactly.
So yeah, you've got this very idyllic setting, Amy, that Northwoods takes place in. And then there's this underbelly that we get to learn about, very much the same as, although it's in a city, we've got DC, right, which is full of these majestic buildings. But then there's this underbelly of crime and fear that Marco is exploring and risking his life in. So for both of you, how did you imagine the setting for your novels?
Amy, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Well, I live in Wisconsin. I don't live in that part of Wisconsin, but I've been to the Northwoods. No one calls it the Northwoods. First of all, in Wisconsin, we call it up north. I've been up north, millions of times in my life, practically. And so it was just a matter of, like, that image came in my mind. And so that was where the story was set to. Like, it just was set in northern Wisconsin, which is handy because I knew everything about it. And so I just would, pluck images out of my mind from real places I've been to. Like, there's a scene where they're in a dive bar, but just like a scummy little tavern in the back of a bait shop. And I just picked out little elements from every scuzzy little tavern in Wisconsin I've ever been to. So I tried to keep it realistic. It's this beautiful town, but what would a beautiful town in northern Wisconsin also have? It would have a bait shop with a cheap bar in the back. Just the reality of it, I think, is interesting, even if it isn't always picturesque.
Well, I thought you did a marvelous job in introducing us into that world. But I want to say, I really liked many among other things the plot twists that you worked in, because I did not see them coming at all, and I thought,
Oh, good.
and I each time it happened, I wasn't expecting that. I thought I knew how this was going to play out, and I was wrong. Very good. I have to congratulate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Anybody who likes, you think you know what the story is going to be, and something happens and it's a complete surprise, and you don't expect it. And so anybody readers who like that kind of thing, I do recommend Northwood.
Thanks so much.
I should also have started at the very top by saying, if anyone is with us on Facebook or YouTube and wants to pop some extra comments or questions, please feel free to. We're happy to address them. But returning to Otho and your setting of DC for Mark Zorn, can you tell us a little? I mean, you've lived in DC for the bulk of your life.
Forever.
Yeah. So that seedy underbelly of DC that you really set the Mark Zorn novels in, was that immediately where you knew it was going to be set?
Yes, it was. Yes. Well, that's because it's a city I know best. I've lived in capital cities all over the world, but Washington, D.C. is my hometown, so I felt comfortable here. And I wanted to make Washington a character in the novel. So you see lots of famous sites, important events take place in the reflecting pool that take place on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, which is where many tourists end up. It's a very impressive site. But I try to show Washington as a divided city, a city of the government, of marble monuments, museums. But there's another side of Washington which is corrupt and crime-ridden. And Mark Zorn, as a homicide detective, knows both sides, and he feels comfortable in both sides, which is one of the complications for him as a character. He's not just a police officer. He mixes easily with really dangerous criminals, and some of whom are if not his friends, are people he works with comfortably. He moves from one Washington to the other. At one point, he describes Washington as a whited sepulcher, meaning a sepulcher which is white and marble on the outside and beautiful, and inside is corrupt. And I like, to my mind, to show that contrast of the corruption inside Washington, but also, oddly enough, the nobility of people who live in the crime-ridden parts of the city. It's not black or whitey, one way or the other. Life in both of these places is more complicated, and you can't trust anybody, but sometimes you do trust people on the other side. And Mark Zorn has learned to live that life, and that's what made, to me, Mark Zorn especially interesting. And
yeah.
I just add another footnote to Northwood. I really like the relationship of your main character to the sheriff. That I thought that I did not expect that, and I thought that was very well done and intriguing.
Thank you. Yeah, his mom, his mom and his boss.
Yes.
I was thinking about your the character in your book, the sort of queen bee of the underworld, and how I just thought, because it just made me think of it, because you said the nobility of folks who live in the underbelly, and that was a perfect example. She was very queenly.
Yes, well, I don't know anybody such a person personally, because I don't move in those worlds. Those are dangerous places. You don't step into them, but I know they exist. The character herself is entirely fictional and created out of my fevered mind. But yes, I liked the relationship between the two of them. She is a venomous, dangerous criminal who will stop at nothing to kill her opponents. And Mark Zorn is actually a little bit afraid of her. She gets him to do some things that he really would not want to do. but although there's line, but their relationship is complicated. You see it in the first novel, and then you see it later on in FIRETRAP, a bit about how they work together. She actually is fond of him in an odd way. She says she does not like to work with police officers or policemen, period, or any law enforcement. So, but she kind of finds herself drawn to Mark Zorn because she's recognized something of herself in him. I don't draw that out, but that's part of what is troubling Mark Zorn. He recognizes that they are cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely, from what both of you just said, a lot of questions of, who are criminals, right? There's and the integrity or lack thereof that comes with conceptualizations of power and status. And a really great example is, Amy, you describe this raid on a penthouse apartment where it says not all criminals lived in drug dens, right? So we're sort of thinking about it's often the people in the penthouses who may be the menace to society. And that kind of applies to you, Otho, with the major pharma companies who perhaps are supposed to be the ones who are doing good for the world, actually doing things that are negative for society. So I wonder if either of you want to speak to that, just our conceptualizations of criminals, crime, status, and power.
Well, certainly in my case, some of the worst criminals are in the government and high up in the government, including in the White House itself, which is what the central story was in the Reflecting Pool. When I picked the title Reflecting Pool, I meant it as an indication that this is reflecting the city of Washington. If you stand on the edge of the Reflecting Pool, which I have many times, then you see at one end the Washington Monument and the other the Lincoln Memorial. It's a beautiful, beautiful scene. But at the opening of that, a woman is drowned in that pool. And that combination of violence and ugliness but with this lovely perspective around was at least intellectually the starting point for me in dealing with this, dealing with Washington, both sides of it, good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Amy?
Well, like I said before, I have a lot of cynicism when it comes to the, corporate healthcare in America. And I personally think it's well-warranted cynicism. Enough said for me. I would believe anything. I would believe anything anybody told me, the wildest conspiracy, because I would believe it. The stakes are so high in terms of power and money that all bets are off.
Yes, I agree. One of the things that shocked me, and I incorporated into FIRETRAP, is the big pharmas. They're directing their ads and promotion not just to doctors themselves, as you pointed out. There's a reference to the CEO of this company taking high prescribing doctors to nightclubs in Las Vegas or wherever they are. He's just come back from a so-called conference, but the conference was where he took amenable doctors to special clubs for men with special tastes. All of that has disgusted me. But also the pharmaceutical companies are directing their promotion at customers. You turn on CNN and you hear about all kinds of diseases I've never heard of, and they're selling a drug for it. Now, this direct promotion to doctors and patients is, I think, fairly new, and I think is dreadful and is leading to all kinds of bad behavior.
It is, yeah. Well, and I think it makes it extra, it just adds another element when it's an industry that's meant to help people. I mean, that is the essence of what this is, and yet.
Well, they do help people. Of course, it's a combination. Nothing is strictly one way or the other in life. I'm sure they produce excellent drugs. Of course, they may gouge the public and pricing, and maybe withhold drugs, when they want to. But it's not all simple. They're not all just producing virulent, addictive drugs. They do other things as well. So it like most things in life, it's complicated.
It really is complicated. And I work in the field of HIV, and the drugs that we have are miracles. I mean, I don't think most people know, but if you have an HIV infection these days, there are medications where you take one pill once a day and you just live your same life. You can have kids. I mean, it is very complicated. Yes.
So I didn't want to paint the big pharma totally negatively, but on the head, I did want to paint them somewhat negatively. So.
Yeah, of course. I do have a question, which is sort of just something that I became very curious about throughout this conversation, which is, Amy, have a lot of your coworkers read your novel?
A handful. Yeah, a handful have.
I was just curious if it's come up at work, because you are bringing this insider sort of view into your characters.
I walked into the exam room, and the patient, I had never met this patient before. They pointed at me and they said, "You wrote a book." And I thought, oh, yes. So that was really, that was a new thing for me.
That's fun. That's great. Yeah. Well, another thing that I think I'm super curious about, and probably other folks are as well, who are your favorite writers? Having been sort of had this writing bug since you were both very young, who do you read that inspires you towards your own writing?
Otho, you want to go first?
Okay, well, I've been reading all kinds of types of fiction for all my life, which goes back to the Spanish-American War, I think. So I love to read, and I read nonfiction, as a matter of fact. Things that don't lend themselves to fiction. I'm particularly interested in grammar and in the history of the English language, or history of linguistics generally. My mother wrote with her brother a book on English, some in the 60s, and I just grew up surrounded by dictionaries and books on the English language, so I continue to read a lot about that. It's kind of esoteric and doesn't lend itself to fiction at all. There's no way I can build in writing a dictionary into a thriller novel. Although in my new novel, which I'm working on now, one of the keys is a person who writes crossword puzzles, and one of the key clues is found in a crossword puzzle. But that's very esoteric. So among fiction, I guess back in the 50s, I started to read spy novels, living abroad and being somewhat connected with that world, world of intelligence collection. So, and eventually I discovered the Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and Tinker Tailor, Soldier Spy, and the other John le Carré novels. And I think I've probably read them all by now. Some are not great, but some of them are just super, and I can read them twice. So, but there are others as well. But most of the good ones are spy fiction, not thriller fiction. But that's for some reason or other, I've been averse to do spy fiction. Maybe it's just too close to home. Not that I'm a spy, honestly, my heart. but I knew a lot of any of them. And so I thought I'd just stay away from that, because you very quickly can run into a violation of the Espionage Act. So I don't want to get within any reach of that.
And for anyone who doesn't know, Otho, who may be watching, it is in his longer bio that I didn't read today, but Otho was thought to be a CIA agent. He was not.
Yeah.
But
well, I think they thought so. They just wanted to discredit me. It was a black operation against me and some others to make my life as complicated as possible. My life is already complicated enough. It hardly added anything.
And Otho wrote a really great essay called So I Married a Spy, which is about how his wife's friends didn't want her to marry him because
they were convinced that I was a spy. I was a CIA agent.
And Amy, what about you? Who are your influencers who you turn to when you're looking for inspiration?
Well, I love spy novels. In fact, I love The Night Manager by John le Carre. That is so good. I love.
Have you seen the film of it made of it?
Oh yes, I saw that first, and I thought, okay, I want to watch the. I want to read the book too. Yes, it was so well done. And things like The Day of the Jackal and that sort of stuff. I just love that. Mm-hmm. And my book is very different from that in most ways. But I love conspiracy and organized crime and that sort of thing that comes from those sort of books. When it comes to crime fiction, my main inspiration is the Cormoran Strike series by Robert Galbraith, who's that's a pseudonym for J.K. Rowling. I love those books because they're very character driven, yet they have complex mysteries. And I heard an interview where J.K. Rowling was saying that people come for the plot but stay for the characters, and I just totally agree with that. And I think I would have written a book like that anyway, but that extra reinforced sort of when I was trying to decide what way to take this story. I wrote most of it before I even knew that those books existed. And then my husband was like, there's this TV show that maybe you might want to watch. And then of course I watched all the TV versions and then read all the books, and I love them so much. And then I mostly read, to be honest, like genre historical romance. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't overlap a ton with crime fiction. But I will say, if anyone is wondering about getting better at writing facial expressions and body language and sort of nonverbal communication, just pick up genre romance novels and pull out a notebook and start making notes. Because it is actually kind of hard to write about that, and no one does it like romance authors.
No, I hadn't realized it. That's a new chapter in my life.
That's really good advice, Amy. I'm gonna just start reading them just to read them.
Okay.
Wonderful. So getting towards the ends of our questions here, Amy, there are a lot of Goodreads users who suspect that the book is the start to a series. So do you have plans to keep going?
Oh yeah. Yeah. This has always been the first book of a series. Like Eli doesn't, he's going to feel better, going into the second book. He's going to get some help. Things are going to improve for him. And there'll be more adventures to be had.
Good. I look forward to them.
Can't wait. And I know you hinted at that earlier, but just wanted to bring it back around to that. Mm-hmm. And Otho, you also hinted earlier that you are already working on a number 4 for Mark Zorn. So I was going to ask you what's next, but
what's next? If I finish it, I haven't finished the book. I'm still working on it. It's a complicated, but still, Mark Zorn is the main character, and some of the other characters that you see in the earlier novels appear in this one, including the chief of police and a senior official in the FBI. But this is each time Mark Zorn appears, he's faced with a totally different opponent, an enemy. In this case, it's a group of neo-Nazis who want to overthrow the U.S. government. And so this is the most dangerous group that Mark Zorn has faced. So we'll see how he does. I haven't finished the book yet.
Yeah.
I know how it comes out, but I haven't written it yet. So yes, so you can expect that, or hopefully in a year or so.
So that before we wrap up, I think we've got time for one more question. And I know just from what you just said, Otho, and also from previous interviews, that you don't usually know the ending when you start writing. It's something that you discover as you work. And Amy, I wonder, when you started writing Northwoods, did you know exactly the way it was going to end, or is it something you discovered?
The first 3 chapters of the book just poured out. And so I didn't know what was going to come in the next sentence. And so I got the first 3 chapters that I knew, and then I knew what the finale scene was going to be. And then it spent me, I spent years trying to fill in the blanks. I do not recommend that approach to writing a book. It was, I think, even as late as the copy editing stage, where we're still trying to pin down the plot, which is not where you want to find yourself.
No, but I know the feeling.
Yeah, I came pretty close to writing myself into a corner. And so this time around, I'm trying to be an outliner, and it with mixed results.
Well, I'm not an outliner myself. I know how to start it. I know who's alive at the end, and in between, I haven't a clue. I just go from chapter to chapter, or sentence to sentence in some cases, and hope it comes out, which it sometimes doesn't, and which is why we have rewrites.
Yeah, I think a lot of readers would be surprised at how many crime novelists write by the seat of their pants like that. A lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No.
Well, whatever both of you are doing is clearly working phenomenally, because we have 2 amazing books here, FIRETRAP and NORTHWOODS, and we're about out of time. So I just want to finish up by thanking the Mysterious Bookshop again so much for hosting us, and to Ryan, who helped us organize all of this. You can order FIRETRAP and NORTHWOODS through the Mysterious Bookshop. Please support your local bookstores, especially this one, which is just amazing. They do incredible work. And don't forget to check out both authors' websites. We've got OthoEskin.com and AmyPeaseWrites.com. And of course, a huge thank you to our guests of honor, Otho and Amy. It has been such an enormous pleasure and privilege chatting with you. And I believe that Ryan was going to come back on at the end here to send us off for the evening.
Well, thank you very much, Meg. It was a pleasure. Great to meet you, Amy, and I wish you wonderful success in your next novel.
Thank you. You too.
I'm actually not sure if Ryan will